doesn't look like much, and it kind of looks especially bad now that we use the DL. So let's style it a little bit. This is not a CSS course. We will not go into excruciating detail about CSS, but I may as well do a little of it live and talk about it as I go at least. But there's not time for a deep dive. Well, although it's far from the biggest problem, we do just have a default font here. Whatever the default sans serif font is for your platform. On a Mac, it's probably Helvetica. On Windows, it's probably Arial. Let's pick something better. Anybody use Google Fonts before? Fonts.google.com, predictably enough. Oh yeah, let's use this barcode font. I'm not going to belabor this. We'll just pick something that looks not too bad. What do you like? Huh? Slabo? Slabo. All right. Sure, why not? Let's hit the little plus sign here. One family selected. Let's look at it. All right, we can embed it. We could put a link tag in our heading. We're basically just linking to a style sheet. We could also import it into another style sheet. I'll do that. Just take this line at import. I'm just going to paste that at the top of my CSS. So that imports it. That makes the font available. To actually use it in my document, I need to say font family, Slabo. It wants me to put 27 pixels really, like there. Really? Okay. I'll do that. Font family, quote, Slabo 27 pixels, comma, sans serif. Now, looks like Slabo was actually a serif font. It's got the little things at the top and bottom. So we can make the fallback another serif font. See how it looks. Well, at least it doesn't look defaulty anymore, right? Give it a little touch of class. All right. I'll commit that real quick. Add Slabo font typeface from Google. Now what if, seems like there's an awful lot of wasted space over here. So what if that stuff appeared to the right of the form instead of underneath it? That would be amazing. I agree. But how? How can we do that? Anybody got any ideas? Lots of ways we could do it. Back in the bad old days, we would have used a float. But floats are a nightmare. So we're not going to do it that way. Let's use Flexbox. Does that sound exciting? It's a CSS module added a few years ago. It now has very wide browser support. Safe to use. Fun to use. Makes it much easier to do certain kinds of layouts, especially when you want things side by side. Before, that was just a nightmare, especially if you wanted to center things vertically. That was unbelievably complicated to do. It's a piece of cake with Flexbox. How do we do it? Well, we've got these two things we want side by side. First, the form. And what do we want beside it? This div. So we need these two things to be inside some sort of container that we can tell to use Flexbox. So I'm going to, if you look out at the website under the tools section, under my VS Code key bindings, I talk about my keyboard shortcuts. One of the ones I have, really handy, is Emmet Wrap with abbreviation, Shift-Command-A. That command is built in, but that keyboard shortcut is not a default. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what it does. I'm going to highlight the div and the form, hit Shift-Command-A, and I could put div or any other shortcut like that. I'm going to use one of the HTML5 elements, main. It acts just like a div. It's just a little more descriptive. So I'll say main, and look what it does. Puts my closing tag down here, my opening tag down there. I do that kind of thing a lot. Decide I want to wrap something in another element. And that makes it so much easier than having to type the opening and closing tags later. So very handy shortcut. So now that I've got that main element, I can tell it to display using Flexbox. So back in my CSS, how do I select that element? Main ought to do it. So a CSS rule consists of a selector, which is just like the selectors that we use in Query Selector. They were CSS selectors before they were used in JavaScript. Then curly braces, then a series of things like this. Property, colon, value, semicolon. This is not JavaScript. The semicolons are not optional. So we'll use the display property here. Display can have several values. Block, inline, inline block, flex. That's what we want. A block element is something like a div or a paragraph. Basically something that takes up an entire line. Something that's going to have a line break after it automatically. Inline elements are everything else, like a link, which could be right in the middle of a sentence. EM, emphasis, which we use to italicize things sometimes. That's another inline element. Span is an inline element. We're going to display flex, which means it's going to become a flex container. Right off the bat, what does that change? Now they're side by side. That's still horrible looking, but they're side by side. That's progress. So what's happening is even side by side, they don't take up the entire width. So it's just pushing them all the way to the left. There's extra space, and that extra space by default is going on the right. But we can tell Flexbox what to do with all that extra space. So on the Flex container, on main, we can put another property called justify content. Now it has a number of different values. So let's play with the different values. And it's going to get annoying to jump back and forth between the browser and the code. So let's just do it right inside our dev tools. Here's our main element. And down below, you can see all of the CSS that's currently being applied to that element. And we can change it right in place. So let's just add a new rule here, justify content. Come on. Try to get it to automatically tell me what all the values are. There we go. Wow. So the default is flex start. What does that do? Somehow I got it to tell me earlier. I actually described it. I think maybe did I Google something earlier? Or was it just right there in the... No, I think it was right there in the code. So flex start does that. It puts all the extra space at the end. It puts all the items toward the beginning. Flex end does exactly the opposite. It squishes all the items toward the end and puts all the extra space at the beginning. Space between puts all the extra space in between the two things. Space around distributes it evenly at the beginning, between the two, and at the end. Well, actually, evenly before and after each item. So you'll see there's twice as much space in the middle as there is at the sides. Space evenly actually makes it completely even. Space around, space between. I think space around looks pretty good. So let's do it. Now doing it in the dev tools does not save it in your code. So once we've determined this is what we want, we need to actually copy that back into our code. And keep in mind, notice the check marks. You can turn rules on and off to see how they look. So without justified content, it was like that. With, it's like this. So here's where I think we're going to get some documentation. If I type justify content, it tells me what it does. And if I hit space around, flex items are evenly distributed in the line with half-size spaces on either end. Space between flex items are evenly distributed in the line. Flex around is what we decided we wanted. Let's refresh the page, and hopefully it looks just like it did. Yeah, not that. There you go. Yeah. That's a little better. So let's use Flexbox. Let's make this form look a little different from the rest of it. Here's the form. There's no particular style being applied to it in our CSS yet. How can we select the form? We could just say form, or we could use the selector we used earlier, say hash user form, because I think that's its ID, right? Either one works. How about we give it a background color? And again, multiple words separated by a hyphen in CSS. So there are a lot of named colors, or you can use RGB, you can use hue, saturation, lightness. Most common way is to use a 6-digit hex code. Hexadecimal digits, that's a base system based on the number 16 instead of on the number 10. Digits 0 through F. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. So each red, green, and blue, 256 possible values of each, 0 through 255, represented by two hexadecimal digits. So, for example, FF0000, that's red. 255 for red, 0 for green, 0 for blue. FF00FF, that's all red, all blue, no green. FFFF00, yellow. All Fs, white, all 0, black. All anything else is going to be some shade of gray. The closer to FFF it is, the lighter it's going to be. Let's make it a nice light gray. How about all E's? E, 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 E. Semicolon. See how it looks. It's a little crowded, isn't it? How about some padding? I think I pointed out the other day that when you look in the DevTools, you see this. So here's the element, here's its padding, here's its border, here's its margin. So what's the difference between padding and margin? Padding is inside the border. So you can think of margin as the space between two things, and the padding as just the thing that pads it inside itself. It's still inside the border. So let's give it a little bit of padding. I'll do it here inside the DevTools first. So how about padding 1 rem? Yeah, that's all right. I'll keep that. Padding 1 rem. How about a border? There's border width, border style, border color, border radius, all kinds of stuff. We can combine width, style, and color into just a single border property. Width first, just 1 pixel. Style next, solid. Color, yeah, not that dark. That looks awfully dramatic. Let's make it a pretty light gray, but not quite so light as the background. How about E3, E3, E3? I don't know how that shows up there. You can see it kind of. Just gives it a little bit of a border. I like it. I'm going to keep it. So let's copy it out of our DevTools into our actual CSS. All right, now our form looks slightly less generic. All those fields are kind of misaligned. Notice the label and the input are already side by side. That's because label and input are both inline elements. What if we just told it to make labels block elements instead? So label ought to select them all. It works like query selector all. And I just say display block instead of display line. See what that gives us. Yeah, now they're on top. That looks a little better. Again, not a CSS class. We're not going to go too crazy with this. Style the form.